Welcome to the Empowered Life podcast with Dustin Vaughn Warncke. Join Dustin as your guide to learning about unlocking your life's ultimate potential. Through inspiring conversations with special guests and proven wisdom, Dustin explores the interconnected values of personal growth, professional success, and a wholesome life filled with love and light. This show is based on tactical and practical concepts for life's greatest successes and achieving your goals, while also being full of inspiration to help you live your best life right now. Discover how to cultivate a mindset of empowerment, achieve success, and create a meaningful impact on the world around you, all while living with purpose, meaning, and significance. Dustin is a former associate publisher of Texas Fish and Game magazine, the author of over 10 books, owner of his own digital marketing agency, an outdoor TV show host, a video and podcast producer. And he will also become one of your best friends forever. Now, get ready to get inspired to live in gratitude. Here's your host, Dustin Vaughn Warncke.
Welcome to our podcast, and thank you so much for listening today. I'm so excited to have the opportunity to be in front of you. This is your host, Dustin Vaughn Warncke. I am just really excited about this episode. I've actually recorded what I call bumpers to this episode a couple of times, and I've had recording issues or interruptions or whatever the case may be. So this is about the third or fourth time that I've recorded this, but I want to get this right because this is a very important episode to what I'm trying to do on this show, and I really think you're going to enjoy today. If you have not heard this near-death experience before, if you don't know already, I'm part of the NDE Radio, which stands for Near-Death Experience, NDE Radio with Lee Whitting. And Reverend Dr. Lee Whitting has a podcast that's been on for, I guess over 10 years now, and recorded over 500 shows. I think it's more like 11 years, but anyway, it's just a really great podcast that it interviews people and reads stories of people who have had near-death experiences, where they have, literally died or had a dream or whatever the case may be, and seeing the other side, see what happens when we die. That's kind of the age-old question. What happens when we die? We all face death, in the physical sense in this world. That's one thing that is a great equalizer is death. We can't escape it, The Buddha taught that we face three conditions in life, and that is old age and sickness and eventually death. Nobody has been able to escape that in this world yet. And, it's one of those things that sounds depressing, but we all face it, and what happens to us after we die? That's the question for the show today. And what I have is a recording that I did back in 2014, end of 2014, I believe. I was going through a very transitional period of my life with career and trying to figure out and find my way and find my footing in the career world. And it's kind of funny. God's always writing a symphony in our life. You won't appreciate the happy high notes without the low sad notes, and it all kind of comes as a package in life, and we've got to be able to take the good with the bad, take the bad with the good, accept what is and not the way we would like to have it, as the Serenity Prayer says. And I write about the Serenity Prayer a lot in my books. Accepting this world as it is, not as I would have it. It's one of the phrases from that prayer of the Serenity Prayer. And Steve Gardipee is a Vietnam veteran, and to say the least, he is a war hero. He would not admit that himself because he believes that there are many other men that fought with valor during that war, regardless of your political beliefs of that war. It's a very unpopular war in the United States, but what happened to him was absolutely amazing. So, long story short, he is given an order in 1970 on his second tour, his tour back to Vietnam after being out for the first tour. He had gone down in 5 helicopter crashes, and on the 5th one, this experience happened to him in July of 1970. doing a recon mission. Basically, he was in a LOACH, which is I forget what LOACH stands for, but it's a little 2-man helicopter, very popular in Vietnam for doing light air surveillance. So he was a scout helicopter pilot. And let me tell you, the life expectancy for a Huey pilot I heard the other day was like, a couple of minutes, as far as they were always getting shot up and everything like that. Life expectancy of a LOACH pilot, probably even less, because they were in a very light aircraft with, definitely taking on enemy fire. And his aircraft took on over 100 shots, 100 bullets of rifle fire, and he crashed. And he was, just on a recon mission trying to find a downed Huey that had been shot down. And this is an incredible story of him meeting the divine on the other side and understanding who the divine is versus what he thought the divine was. He had a chip on his shoulder that he thought God was this mean, vengeful God, and, he found out something completely different. So what I wanted to do with this show, being one of our first ones in to this journey together, is showcase Steve's story that I recorded for him that has almost 1.9 million views, nearly 2 million views on YouTube, that I started for him back in 2014, and when I first published this. And something happened, I guess. The video had a decent amount of views, but didn't get an amazing amount of views until later in life, after we had recorded it, many years after we recorded it, probably 2019. Then 2020 hit, and we all know what happened then with COVID and everything. Everybody just started, hitting this video, and it gave people hope. It gave people hope that we're dying, or gave people hope that that we're scared, that we're fearful, that God is in charge. And this is not a religious thing at all, because Steve is not technically a very religious person in the respect of following all the rules of religion and all that other stuff and those kind of things. It's bigger than that. Religion is man's way to get to God. God's relationship is the most important part of any relationship in that respect of loving God, is a lot more powerful than what we let it off to be, that we love God. God's love for us is immeasurably bigger than our love for even ourselves. And our own problems and everything like that. And God is bigger than all of your problems. That's one thing I want you to leave this podcast with when we're done here, is to realize that there is hope, and you are carried by grace. And this podcast is a testament to that, because I'm going to play the audio recording of his testimony that I recorded in 2014, which has been 10 years ago. It's kind of the 10-year anniversary of this. But this is a very profound statement that I wanted to showcase here. And I've wanted to do something like this for a while, and I've been trying to find the right way to present this, because this is so impactful for my life. And when I first heard this is probably 2012. So long story short, it's funny how God works. It really is, because in 2014, I decided to get Steve to record this. Him and I met in a fishing ministry called Crosswater Outfitters in 2012, I guess, when I officially joined the ministry. One of my first events was a Friends and Neighbors event, which we do typically with people that we know as brothers in Christ that end up, needing encouragement. We go on a fishing trip, we have devotions, that kind of stuff, kind of like we do the soldiers events, but it's more casual and laid back and everything like that. There's nothing formal, no set, a couple of set schedules, but that's it. And it's a weekend. It's from Friday afternoon to Sunday afternoon. And Steve shared his story for the first time and was kind of nervous about doing so, because he didn't want people to, think he was crazy or think that he was hallucinating all this stuff. And if you listen to it, he clearly wasn't. There's no way you could hallucinate and still remember all this 50 years later. Over 50 years later now. So this is the story of Steve Gardipee, shot down in Vietnam, behind enemy lines, in a jungle. His helicopter crashes, and there's a cobra above him that is basically circling around trying to find recon to be able to get him, rescued. In Steve's story, his gunner is basically trying to rescue him behind enemy lines, and it's a hopeless situation. And if there's ever hope in a hopeless situation, this would be that story and that testimony. And I want this to inspire you in a profound way, because it did for me too, as far as what your vision of what the divine is, what a higher power is. And that higher power is literally made up of love. Love is the most powerful energy in the universe. And we should lead with love in our life. Not hatred, not anger, not regret, not all these things that are negative, but lead with love and pure love from the divine. And regardless of what you call this divine entity that we know as God, or what religious faith that you walk, or any of that stuff, that is completely up to you. I'm not here to sway you one way or the other. I'm here to tell you that you are loved by a higher power. And what you believe from that is definitely your choice. I always say that, people hate to be sold, but they love to buy. When it comes to ideas and that kind of stuff, that's very, very true. People hate to be sold, but they love to buy. So I'm offering you something to buy here, but you're not actually taking your wallet out and paying anything for it. But basically, I'm offering you a concept of this if you've never heard this story before, and I have a feeling that most of you listening to this have not. And you can pick it up and take what is beneficial for you, but I do think you'll find something beneficial with it. So here is the story of Steve Gardipee. This is from the video that I entitled How He Loves Us, even though God is not a he or a she, God's both. Female and male genders, and bigger than all of our problems, bigger than any of our, any of our issues, and has a divine plan for our life that we need to let play out and trust. That's what this all boils down to, is trust. And the fact that, we have free will and God has will too, to help us survive. And if there was ever a hopeless situation of not surviving, that would be this. But we have this story because God's will prevailed. And I think you're really going to enjoy this. So without further ado, here is a story of Steve Gardipee from 10 years ago, which is still just as relevant as it is today. You can go check out the actual live story, see Steve telling this story on my YouTube channel. It's one of the first videos, it is the most popular video on my YouTube channel as far as the watches and views go. So check it out, and I'll be back with you after this recording. And thank you so much for joining us today. Here we go.
Okay, the story I'm going to tell you, it's going to be what actually happened to me, and I'll be honest, when I first started my life, and I'd heard about the God that would be mean and vengeful, and you sinned, you'd go to hell, and I had a chip on my shoulder because I felt he was promised me something, and trust me, what he promises us we cannot comprehend. And when somebody promises me something I can't comprehend, he's promising me nothing. And then he created me where I was weak, and I would give in to temptation. So I'm thinking, what kind of God is this? It's in keeping with what I learned about him, that he promises you absolutely nothing, and he asks everything of you. And then after my experience, I found out he gives us everything and asks absolutely nothing of us. The gift is that profound. And what happened is we had a Huey shot up. The major said, go find out who got him. My job was I was a scout pilot, and I was gifted with the ability to find the enemy, and no matter how well hidden they were. So I went out, and luckily or regrettably, I found them. And to make a long story short, we got shot up pretty bad. We took 100 and something hits in that little LOACH, and shot part of my controls out. Almost flew my left arm off, and I got my leg shot up. So we crashed, and things started getting kind of vague at that point. I understand my gunner pulled me out of the aircraft. I thought I climbed out. I do remember, and this has a point, there was a little bush near my head, and I realized, oh, this is the center of the base camp. So what was surprising is I never felt any pain. When I was laying down and my gunner was bandaging my arm, I told him to leave, we're not getting out of there. And he said no, he wouldn't leave me, and things started getting kind of blurry. My vision started getting blurred, and I was the kind of guy that wouldn't ask a whole lot from God until I needed something. And I needed to get out of there because we're in the middle of the base camp. I'm shot up very bad. My gunner got a bullet through the butt. And I said, we're going to get captured, or we're going to get shot, or I'm going to die somehow. And I started bargaining with God. I'll be good, I'll be good for a week. Just get me out of here, God. I know that it's going to be tough. And then things started getting kind of gray on me. And I was wondering what's happening. I said, God, please don't let me die. Please don't let me die. I was terrified. And then things went black, pitch black. And now I know there's no way I'm going to get out of there because it's pitch black and I'm helpless and I can't even hardly move. I've lost so much blood by then. And then the unique thing started happening. I started feeling pretty good. And I said, what's happening to me? And I realized I was dying. People say I'm dying. I was actually in the physical process of dying. And at that point, I stopped being afraid. It's not, I don't know how other people die, but for me, I thought dying was a horrible, painful, terrible thing. And it was actually an incredibly pleasant thing. And as I was dying, I accepted it. And I said, God, this is obviously your will. There's no bargaining anymore. I quit bargaining with him because I knew I was dying. And as I was fading back, all of a sudden, you hear about the bright light. The brightest thing that you can imagine is a dark hole compared to the bright light that I saw. And as I saw that, I started feeling good, and I got Demerol in the hospital, all the things for pain. They can't touch the feeling I was starting to feel. And I'm laying there in this beautiful, bright light, which I described later as it wasn't God is the light, but he's love. I try to imagine, is he energy? What exactly is God? One thing, he is literally made up of love. And I started feeling that love around me. And at one point I remember looking down, seeing my head's next to this bush, and it was years later for it dawned on me, you can't see your own head. So at that point I had that out-of-body experience, and all of a sudden I went back into this little speck. And the light's getting brighter and brighter, and I'm expanding out, and everything within this bubble was like my new life in heaven. And I expanded, I remember, into the roots, in the soil surrounding the roots of this little bush next to my head. And I could see every molecule of water and the nutrients and the cells inside the plant, from the inside, the outside, the top, the bottom. And it was many, many years later I realized plants take the nutrients up through molecules. I saw that back in July 28th of 1970. And as I'm expanding out, I'm wondering what's going on, then I start feeling this presence. And it was God. And he let me know that he's now surrounding me, protecting me, and I'm expanding out. And now what words I tell you were words, he didn't speak to me. He made his thought known to me. Like I tell my friends, I'll say red. And all of a sudden, you'll see the color red in your head. Or I'll say apple and you visualize an apple. So his thoughts were made known to me. And as I'm expanding out, he said to me in my interpretation, he said, you will expand out into the cosmos and know all these things. We'll expand out into the cosmos. And I was given power that was immeasurably more powerful than I ever imagined God to be. And I was still cocky, I was still myself. I remember kind of puffing my chest up saying, I'm a super God. Not disrespect for God, but I'm a super God. We cannot comprehend what we're going to become. It's immeasurably more powerful than God is, that we think he is. As I'm kind of getting kind of cocky, God made his thought known to me, and he gave me a vision. He's holding me in his hands like a premature infant. And this is what you are. And I was telling Brian, it's like I'm born again into heaven this time, but he saw me, and I felt his proudness like a parent feels a child when they're first born. And I'm thinking, well, this is confusion. He sees me as a little child. I felt his emotions. I felt he was proud of me. Here's this new infant coming into his world. But I'm still the super God. And then he smiled, and I felt him smile. I felt his amusement. He said, even in this state that you were in as a super God, you cannot begin to comprehend what I am. We can't comprehend what we're going to be, and he's still infinitely more powerful and loving and caring than that. So that kind of put me back in my place. And I'm thinking, I'll be able to go anywhere. And then all of a sudden, he kind of backed away, and I'm thinking, I don't have a body. This is frightening. It started to frighten me. And I actually went like this, and I could feel my fingers in my hands. And I said, well, I can't see me, but I'm here. And then he said, you're to go out and be everywhere. So I kind of stepped out of my body, and it was like all of a sudden I could be anywhere in his creation at one time, and I could focus on whatever I wanted to focus on. Then I went back in my body. And I went back and forth a couple times. And all of a sudden I started thinking, every time I went back and where I could feel like I'm in a body, it was horrible. It was so confining. I wanted to be out and being free and out in the cosmos with God. As I'm experiencing all these things, the one that really surprised me was his love. And I'd say take a dictionary and take all the bad words out, regrets, sorrow, fear, embarrassment. They're not there. There is absolutely nothing in heaven that is bad. It's 100% pure love and happiness. All the things that I did in my past, you could remember them, but they were all forgiven. It's like, God, I made you that way for a reason which was not made known to me. And I'm feeling this love, and I tell people his love was so strong, I literally felt it. It's like being in the air when it's calm. You know the air is there, but you can't feel it. But then you soak in a warm bath, that warm water, you can feel that. God's love was so strong, I literally felt it. I felt his presence. And I knew I could be anywhere, and I'm 11, I was forgiven. And I thought, this isn't a mean, vengeful God. Like I was even telling Brian, I remember the way I grew up, and they said the people cower, and they stand in the back of their church. I'm not worthy of being up front near God. Well, I had good, loving parents, and when I met my dad, we'd hug each other. I didn't cower up to my dad. Well, God doesn't want us to cower in front of him. He created us strictly to love. He has one need that I thought I felt. He needs to love. That's why he created all this stuff. He didn't create us so he could lord over us and dominate over us and make us feel inferior. He wants to love us. And I thought, that's not the God that I grew up knowing. I'm not going to be punished for making my mistakes. If I ask God to forgive me, he will. And another thing I saw that he will not pull you kicking and screaming into heaven. If you don't want to go, he didn't even know if it's known, but you're not coming. You have to want him to forgive you and ask him to forgive you, and he'll bring you, no matter how bad you've been, how horrible you've been, how ashamed of yourself you are, he forgives you if you just ask for him to forgive you, and he takes you into heaven. So I'm sitting there and I'm thinking, this is not what I thought it was going to be. Especially the dying part. I thought everybody, my family, my friends, my loved ones, I finished a tour in Vietnam and I volunteered to go back. And it was on that extension where, this happened. I made it 2 months into my extension. And I saw a man, and I started praying. I said, Mom and Dad, I'm sorry that I came back. I made it through my first tour a little beat up, but not serious. And now I came back here and I've hurt you because I was so selfish. I wanted to come back and experience this thing that I thought I was fighting for their freedom. And all of a sudden, God said, you're not ready. I said, yes, I'm ready. You can't be doing what you think you're doing. You're going to try to send me back? I won't go back. You can't show me this and let me feel this love and this no worries of any kind. As I will be alive for infinity. And now send me back in my body, and it's shot up and it's hurting in the middle of the jungles. I won't go back, and you put me back in my body, I'll make sure I die. I felt, like I said, you can feel his emotion. I felt his sternness. And he said to me, he wasn't angry, but he was stern. He's tough love. And he said, no, you cannot take this. Only I can give this to you, and if you ever try to take it, it will never be yours. And I remember, I don't usually talk like this. I'm not flowery in religious speak. And I said, Father, your will be done. And I went back, and the books say sometimes it's a tunnel of light. It's a tunnel of love. The light thing is, to me, in my opinion, is a misnomer. You're surrounded strictly by love, and the love is a bright light, so bright that I call it an incredible clearness, because the mind can't comprehend anything that bright. We're that limited. And as I'm going down this tunnel, the demons from hell were trying to grab my soul. And it's like, again, being at a zoo and you're behind a fence and you look at the horrible animals. They don't frighten you, you're curious. And I couldn't feel their pain and suffering, but I was made aware of their tremendous torment in hell. And they don't even have the luxury of knowing they've got your soul. I didn't see any bad souls, and it was just to cast out demons from that were in heaven, now in hell. And they were trying to get my soul, because they never know if they've got you. They have to fight constantly to get your soul, because they really don't ever have it. Because no matter how late it is in your life, I'm laid out there in the jungles dying. And all of a sudden I get religion. I says, God, forgive me, please, I'm sorry for everything I've done. And of course he forgave me. And I was sincere. It wasn't one of these false promises. So I'm going back down into my body. Then all of a sudden I'm back in it and I'm confused. I'm thinking, God, you take me back. No, God, don't take me back. Oh, then I'm back to where I was. Really, God, I'm bargaining with, don't let me die. Don't let me die. And then, of course, we were eventually rescued after several hours. And I went to the hospital, and regardless of my friends, this dad died again on the table there, and I didn't have the experience. And they told my friends he died, we've lost him, go home. And there's still friends of mine that don't know I'm alive. But the experience that I got from that is all the little pettiness and people annoy us and all that. It doesn't mean anything. Compared to what we're going to get, it doesn't mean anything. It's just a little, prick on our side. And I tell people now, I know he will forgive me for what I do, but I'm not going to take it for granted. You can't come up and say, I can sin, therefore I can ask for God's forgiveness. You have to have the sincerity. And I see something where it's bad. I tell people that give me the wrong change, for example. And I said, you gave me the wrong amount of change. And he says, why'd you do that? And I said, because he's watching. It's for him. And the only sadness I felt in heaven, and it wasn't my sadness, it was God's sadness. And when I was going through that torment, knowing that my friends would be suffering and all that, thinking I died this mean, horrible death. And my buddy Steve, who was supposed to be here, regrettably he couldn't make it. He tormented himself for years thinking I died this horrible death because he dragged me through the jungle for 2.5 hours popping bad guys, some within 3 feet of him, and he has a horrible experience. And he said, here I drug you to the woods for 2.5 hours, you suffered, you were moaning, you were crying, and then I let you die. I should let you die immediately. The pain you went through, and I said, I don't have a recollection of it. But, sorry, I just had a flashback. Sometimes I'm still there. And he couldn't separate that what happened to me then, I'm the same person. And I said all that was forgiven, all that was wonderful, but God sensed that heartache that I had, and you're not supposed to experience anything bad in heaven. It's impossible, you can't. And that's when he said, you're not ready, because I was experiencing regrets. And his sadness, and it was made known to me, I'm saddened over what you do to each other. When we do things to each other and harm each other and hurt each other, we're not hurting each other. Although we're hurting him. It saddens him what we do to each other. He created us all to be wonderful and have a wonderful gift, and sometimes being human, I don't know why we have that weakness. God knows, and it wasn't made known to me that it hurts him when we hurt each other. We lie from each other. We ridicule each other. That's a direct assault on his emotions. And so I feel blessed that I had a chance to go through that. It honestly, and I'm not being facetious here, it was worth getting shot for. And I wonder, one thing is, in the Bible it says, blessed is he who believes and has not seen. Well, I wasn't that strong, and I had a chip on my shoulder. Maybe that's what he protected me from, is I am here, I do love you. And he let me see because I didn't believe without seeing. And it changed my life, and that even though I'm still human, I still make my mistakes. I constantly pray to God, give me the strength. I don't want to lose what I saw. I want to be back in your love. And please, just help me be strong. And thank you for everything you've done. Don't take him for granted. And thank you for the blessing he gave me, and that let me be in his presence for, well, there's no time up there, so it was an instant, it was 1,000,000 years. And that's pretty much the end of what happened to me. I came back in my body, and regrettably I was rescued. And I'm here until the next time, and I look forward to going home again. And thank you for listening.
That was an amazing experience, and to have the opportunity to share this with you, this has just been in my heart to share this for a while, because I think there's so much power in those words that God told Steve, and the fact that we are never alone. I mean, God's the one that made all this, and the fact that we live, breathe, and eat, success and failure and everything that we run into in life. We have the good points, we have the bad points, and like I said earlier, it's a symphony. It's the thing we forget is life is a symphony. And I'm going to read a chapter from my book, one of the future episodes, about life being a symphony from an intentional, optimized life, and the fact that you have to appreciate both. You have to appreciate the good times, as the old saying goes, a cliche phrase. got to take the good with the bad, and the bad with the good. And, it's all kind of a melting pot. The main thing to take away from is you've got to prevail. You've got to be able to succeed in the midst of failure, in the midst of every bit of the chips being down on your table, so to speak, in the card game of life. There's hope. There's always hope. If you are still breathing and taking in and blowing out oxygen on this earth, you're still important, and you still have an opportunity to impact this world. And I think that this video, with some of the comments that I received of it, and I still get comments just about every day on this video, years and years and years later, it's that in some cases it saves somebody's life. It saves somebody from doing the unthinkable, for taking themselves out of this world, by default. And I think that we forget sometimes, and experiences like this remind us sometimes that we have a ultimate, goal of becoming a better version of ourselves in this world and improving our lives in this world by the grace of God. And regardless, again, of your belief system, I don't make any judgments about if you're, Muslim, Buddhist, Christian, whatever you want to believe is fine. But to know that there's a divine entity that set all this into action, and that you are cared for and loved. And the two things that I've learned from near-death experiences, which I'll probably talk a lot about in this show, are, number one, that, no matter what happens, number one, is that you are going to be okay. You are going to be okay. You're going to get through whatever it is. And it's said clearly in the Bible, I believe in the book of Psalms, God's never going to give you more than you can handle. Some days I wonder if that challenge is correct, but, and I think we all do sometimes. We're like, okay, really, God? But then backing out of that, the other side of it is that everything's going to be okay is number one. The other point is that, having to do with the fact that everything is as it should be. And I had to pause and think about that, because it's hard to say that when life does not seem fair, that when life seems like it's chaos and life does not seem like it makes sense. Everything is as it should be is number two. And everything is going to be okay is number one. Those are the two things I want you to live with from this show, is the fact that you are divinely loved. And you are divinely loved, and you are divinely loved by something that's bigger than you could ever imagine. And I want you to live with that and live with hope. Things are going to get better if they're rough right now. And also that the peace that you are loved immeasurably more than anybody has ever loved you, and you could ever love yourself, by a divine power. And that's just by default. I mean, whether you love that divine power back or not is up to you. But as Steve said, one of his feelings that he got from the divine was the fact that he had a need, if there ever was a need that God had, to be loved in return. Like a parent has a child and wants to, enjoy that child's love in return for creating that child and nurturing that child as that child's an infant and born helpless into this world. And I kind of find that interesting that, no matter what we do or where we go or whatever the case may be, grace finds us. And grace definitely found Steve in the floor of that jungle that time, and grace will find you too. So I want you to live with that resolve, that resilience, that power in your life, that you are not alone and you're blessed. And I want you to be a blessing because you're blessed. And this is my message to you today, and what's on my heart to share with you, is to give abundantly of yourself to a bigger, higher power than yourself. And I don't just mean worshiping and praising God and all that other stuff. That's your business. But when you back out of yourself and see the bigger picture of this ripple effect of the fact that things are always in motion with your actions and reactions and responses and those kind of things, that everything matters in that respect. And the fact that God immeasurably forgives you and immeasurably loves you more than you could ever imagine. And that's a beautiful thing about that. So, all right, this was another show. I really enjoyed sharing this with you. This is a very meaningful podcast for me that I've wanted to do for a number of months now. And wanted it to be one of the first ones that I released because this is really an impactful show to me because things have such meaning to me with Steve's, recording here, and also his testimony, and also the fact that this is probably one of the reasons I was put on earth was to share his story. He didn't want to record this at all. He was embarrassed, like I said earlier. He was kind of scared about, sharing this, and people think he was crazy. And the overwhelming, side of that is that he ended up getting a lot of praise. A lot of people's lives were saved. A lot of people were inspired to keep going and keep moving, and then have comfort and peace when it was time for them to pass away from this earth. And that's a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful thing, to die with dignity and to go on and transition into another world and live that world with the divine creator forever, or whatever happens next. None of us truly know exactly where we go in eternity, but we know where we end up in eternity if we trust in the plan of God. And that's the other thing when it comes to salvation and those kind of things that we talk about in Christianity a lot. Steve was not a Christian when this happened, God showed him, he as he jokes around, he found religion, in the middle of the jungle of Vietnam, but, he really enjoyed, God's love and presence and wanted to go back there right away, but God tells him, back, like, hey, back up, you cannot take this from me, this can only be given to you or it will never be yours. And I think that's something that, that we need to hear, because that statement has saved a lot of people from, like I said, doing the unthinkable and taking their own life. And during COVID and, times of depression and times of all kinds of turmoil in our life, that's a very common thing, that people think about. Suicidal ideation is a big deal. I've dealt with it as a depression, patient, and suffered from severe depression over, the last 10, 12, 13 years. And, but, I'm getting treatment and help and medicine and everything like that for that. I just have a chemical imbalance in my brain that causes that. But, this story gave me so much hope that there's just a beautiful, beautiful, beautiful other side after we die. But we need to trust in the plan. God's not going to bring you kicking and screaming into heaven. You've got to ask for forgiveness. You've got to, give your life over and trust in that, and do that now versus, when you're on your quote unquote deathbed one day, because that's the thing. We don't like to face death, but it's going to happen to all of us in this physical world. And I want you to end up in the best place possible with the best creator possible, the only creator. It's a beautiful thing. So, all right. Thank you so much for listening today, watching if you're watching on YouTube, wherever you're consuming this podcast. Thank you so much for doing so. We are very blessed to have you on this show, and this has just been such a blessing to me to be able to share this with you and give you hope and meaning and significance in your own life. And thank you for joining me for that. Have an awesome day, and we'll see you next time.
Thank you for listening to The Empowered Life with Dustin Vaughn Warncke. To learn more about Dustin, please visit his creator hub at dustinsprojects.com. Warncke Enterprises, Dustin's very own digital services company, can be found at businesswithdustin.com, and his books are available at either website or at dustinsbooks.com. Audio presentations of each of Dustin's latest books can be found on YouTube and streamed at no cost. Please subscribe to the Empowered Life podcast on your favorite podcast app, and thank you for your support and sharing this show with a friend.